All right, I think we should begin. I am not a believer that those who are early should be punished for those who are not so very early. So this morning we are going to spend some time looking at interventions for health education and health promotion. And the statement is that how making that crucial decision. What are some things that we need to give thought to as we look at in planning and implementing interventions for the various health issues that we may have to deal with. Now, we would have looked at needs assessment, we'd have looked at the whole business of setting goals and objectives over time. And so the question can be asked, so what is next? As planners, we need to decide on an appropriate means of reaching the target population and of attaining the goals and the objectives that would have been outlined as a reason for doing or what we hope to achieve out of planning and implementing an intervention. Planned activities must be so designed that desired outcomes are achieved. There is no point us having an issue to deal with, a community that needs to be addressed. We plan something, and then when we go, would not have achieved the objective. And there are many a times when the Ministry of Health would have engaged in and embarked on programs, and at the end of the day, there is not much to show. Sometimes the reason for that is that the plans were made with the target population excluded from the planning process. And we were of the opinion that we can just plan something, go down there and expect them to see the merit of it, expect them to embrace it with open arms when we did not bring them to the table to find out what their thoughts were, to find out whether or not what we perceive as the things that needs to be addressed, whether or not they see those things as the top of their priority. So there are many reasons that can exist as to why persons may or may not embrace interventions when we use a top-down approach to that particular process. We want to ensure that when we execute these plans and activities, they really help us to achieve the intervention that we really want to occur. So by definition, an intervention is any set of methods, techniques, or processes that are designed to effect changes in behaviors or within the environment. It can be a single activity or it can be a combination of activities. The most effective health education promotion interventions are really those that are culturally appropriate and are based on health theories and application of these health models. And there are many of those are around, and we can always find one to fit whatever it is that we want to do or to accomplish. There are a range of interventions available to be used in health promotion programs. We can, for example, do the instruction teacher-based one. We tend to call that one the chalk and talk. But we find that when we do the chalk and talk, some persons will learn, some may not learn because we have to keep in mind the learning domains and how people learn, how they acquire knowledge, and what is it that can make the knowledge stay with them. So even when we talk about the instruction and teacher base, even in doing that, we have to find creative ways of presenting it so that it is attractive to our target population. There are environmental change that can happen that can speak to things that are going on. So for example, we have like the coastal organization that looks at what is happening with the coral reefs and look at the cleaning up of beaches. So we can look at Environmental Foundation of Jamaica, who would spend some time doing that, and they partner with others to do those beach cleanup on a periodic basis to ensure that we do not overload our ocean space with too much garbage because it has implication for the ecosystem, inclusive of the fish life, and fish is a staple on most plates in Jamaica. Communication and media, we have to work with them because they have a presence in people's home that we don't have. And when we utilize them, we are better able to reach some of the target population that we actually want to reach. But even applying communication, you also have to look at the various target age group that you are working on and where they are likely to congregate so that that information can reach them. So we know that if we're looking at young people your age, then we must go to TikTok or we must go to Instagram page. Very few persons in the younger age group are on other websites or sorry, are using other apps for fun and for gaining information. If you want the older folks, you talk about Facebook as a social media platform, but you also have at your disposal the talk shows that happens during the day, especially for those persons who are retired. They look forward to the time when their favorite talk show host would come on. There was a time when that most famous person was Mutty Perkins, but he has since then depart from this life, and so they would have latched themselves onto different media personalities as the person to listen to throughout the course of the day. And they do call into their programs. This is a place and a space where for them their voices can be heard. So also have to look at the different age band, as I said before, and where they congregate when we are going to be engaging the media. Also, there are some things that we can engage the media for general purposes or for the general population. And we have to know the again where to get that information out and how to access some of these things. So we find out, get a lot of what we do. We cannot do it minus the media. We have to work with them because they're an integral part of the things that we do. The government have to embrace the media. And if you notice, most of our government organizations now, they are on Facebook, they have a presence on Instagram, they have a presence on is exit that thing is now called Trump favorite platform. So all of those platforms you'll find out that they now have presence there because they recognize that people congregate on these platforms. And even sometimes information coming from the Minister of Health, and he will talk about on Instagram. So the Ministry of Health Instagram page is where you download a lot of the information rather than to come to use the media, the television, because when they are going to place ads on these platforms, they are quite costly. And so they use quite a bit of the social media platform to get across to the population. Advocacy is something that we really want the population at the grassroots level to be able to do on their own behalf so that they can get the kind of support and have access to resources that are needed to carry out the things that they want to do. Social support, again, that goes without saying, counseling, regulatory strategy, and sometimes we have to have direct contact with the target population. The key consideration though in intervention planning is that the health education promotion programs must match the specific needs of a target population. And we'd have looked at a different type of needs before. We talk about the normative needs, the felt need, the perceived need, and all of those things. So we have to make sure that we meet them where they are at. It must represent a broad range of approaches in order to affect the target population in different ways. And we have got to remember that even though everybody might be adults, if you're thinking about that particular population, everybody is not on the same page. Everybody will not learn in the same way that they acquire knowledge. So whether individuals need knowledge practice in specific skills, that we must also pay attention to. And sometimes there may be a need for a change of attitude, change in behavior, support by significant others, or some broad environmental change that they may be required. And so for an example, if we look at drug abuse prevention program for school-age adolescents, and this can achieve significant reduction in the rates of the social, behavioral, and the academic problems when interventions are designed for youth who are at risk for beginning to experiment with drug use. And by the time they reach teenage years, not everybody, but quite a number of young persons would have tried a substance even once. This program designed to prevent school and alcohol drug use in adolescents would not be effective for adolescents who are already having an addiction problem. Is a different level of intervention would have to use with this particular set. The intervention that they would need would be quite different from that those who have not yet initiated the process is going to be needing. So you're still talking about adolescents, but we have to understand the different levels that they are at in planning an intervention program. So one brush cannot be used to paint everybody because the people are at different levels. And which health model come to your mind when we talk about different levels of that people are at and require intervention? Which health model come to your mind? I should hear the place lighting up.
Stages of change.
That's right, Melissa. It's stages of change. And that one, when used in combination with the health belief model, can help to achieve quite a bit. So what are the types of strategies for intervention that we can look at? There are 5 levels of strategies that can be utilized for intervention. You have the positive development, you have a universal, you have a selective, the indicative, as well as the treatment. Did I skip too far? All right. Positive development strategy. This one target an entire population with the goal of enhancing strengths in order to reduce the risk of later problem outcomes or to increase prospects for positive development. And if we look carefully, we can think about what happened with COVID-19, where the primary objective was to minimize the number of persons coming up with or becoming affected by the COVID-19 germ. So they had to take a population-wide approach and the development of the disaster risk management protocol that was designed to guide what was happening from a day-to-day basis, and that they usually update that one every week with the most recent information that is available. And they expect persons to have access to it and to be able to actually apply the recommendations to ensure that they remain safe and that those who were around them were safe as well. We all know, having looked at, seen live and direct what was transpiring on the ground, would have recognized that there are some persons who might have gone into the discussion session, would even have gotten a copy of a disaster risk management protocol, and they still did not practice the recommendations or the guidelines that were laid down. So we have to build programs that focus, for example, this for the entire population base. We have to build personal and social skills through teacher, parent, and youth training. And we also look at development of individualized action plans to improve fitness levels after receiving the result of a fitness screening test. So these are examples of how we could do a positive development strategy for the population-wide approach. But then we have the universal preventive intervention. And this one target population is the general public again, or population that has been unified on the basis of individual risk. For example, interventions designed for everyone. And so you have a mass media campaign is what we use as a main strategy. So whenever you see mass media campaign taking place, the type of intervention being brought to the table is a universal prevention that is being utilized. So, for example, you have programs that address risk factors in broadly defined population groups. For example, all children in a particular grade or age range receive violence prevention instruction and improved recess supervision, in which teachers intervene with guided discovery when there are acts of violence on the school compound. So universal, and universal, I think is self-explanatory too. We talk about universal precaution, means that you wear gloves for every time you're going to be attending to a patient and for certain activities. In the selective preventive intervention, the target are individuals or subgroups of the population who whose risk factor for developing an illness or disorder is higher than average. They're talking about those persons who have risk factors that would make them predisposed to picking up a particular health or health related issues. So because they share significant factor, interventions are designed to reduce that risk. So for example, our construction workers who work with heavy machinery, they need earplugs to help to protect their eardrums. Commercial sex workers, we encourage them to use condom to remember that is their livelihood, and a positive test result is not going to help them in making that getting acquiring the income through job placement that they may actually need. And so we work with the community sector. And I remember some years ago, we did something that was not thought through properly. There was a workshop for community sex workers. And that workshop was designed to help them to manage their resources so that they can come out of the trade if they so choose. So we talk about providing them with financial management guidance, have persons come in and talk with them. We're talking about helping them to when they develop the entrepreneurial skill, then they can launch out into business, legitimate business enterprises. And then once that is up and running, then they could have been pulled back from what they were doing. But unfortunately for us, when we went down to Ocherios at the big hotel, have them down there. And by the way, they were paid for a time that they were there because it was loss of income because they were not able to be on the road to apply their trade. So a lot of money was invested into the workshop. But it so happened that when we had gone down, it was a time when the cruise ships come into port. And so while in the workshop, the cruise ship, when it comes into port, it usually blows its horn. If that's what it's called, that thing that they blow is called. And so many persons would have heard it one by one. They start to excuse themselves to go to the bathroom. And then we did not see them until the following day. So these are some of the things that can happen. So we have to be very careful when we're planning intervention. We look at venue, we look at activities around the venue and the impact of the activities on the participants that are going to be there within the workshop. That was a real eye-opener for us. Another example is healthcare workers to teenagers, talking to them about the whole business of safer sex practices. But we know that the talk and the chalk sometimes do not sit very well with young people because they are so mindset that they think that they need to do experimentations. So we have some of those challenges when it comes to them. Indicated preventive intervention. This one the target populations are high-risk individuals who have detectable signs or symptoms but not reach diagnosis criteria. So for example, smoker with smoker's cough but not diagnosed with lung cancer. Home-based and school-based intervention, home-based and school-based interventions that focus on disruptive boys in kindergarten. We would have to do some amount of digging, some amount of analysis. Why is it that this person is exhibiting this behavior? What is happening in their personal space that may be a trigger for these persons? And having said that about trigger, when I was at the Spanish Hospital last week with my mother, there was a woman in the emergency area. Apparently, she has some mental related issue, but her trigger was police officers. So while we were there, the police brought in some guys, some for treatment, and at least two of them went back with Morgan's funeral home. The lady, at the minute she saw the police, her behavior becomes so very disruptive. She was loud, a lot of expletives, and then when they left, she calmed down. They actually had to restrain her at one point. After the police left, she was as calm as a lamb. And the minute they came back, she started. And I recognized that there is something with the police for this lady that was her trigger. The minute that she sees them, that was how she started to behave. So we have to think about some of these things when we are planning our intervention. What is it that may trigger some of the responses that we see? In the targeted interventions, approaches that target those who have high symptom levels or a diagnosable illness or disorder. And these intervention, the treatment ones, usually take place in a clinical setting. So they'll come in because they would have been experiencing some amount of symptoms and some I would have seen some signs and they would have come in and outline what is that they have felt and what is that they would have seen. And based on that, you would have made that preliminary diagnosis, but you'd have follow up with further examination and assessment to confirm what you would have deemed the appropriate cause of the issues that they present themselves with. And I just want us to do a little recap here because we look at the types of intervention or preventions, but it's that look at the levels of prevention. And we have the primary, where the risk reduction strategy is what we put to the table because we want to protection from disease agents. So, for example, we look at the whole business of having our children vaccinated so that they do not come down with those childhood diseases. At a secondary level, we focus on early detection, where education is all about the early signs of the disease. And so a lot of screenings are recommended at this level to capture early if something is happening, because the earlier we detect, then it is more likely that the medication will have potency and efficacy in helping the persons to resolve if the issue is something that is reversible. At tertiary prevention level, we look at treatment and we want to prevent suffering and disability and also promote patient remedial actions and sometimes the necessary adjustments that they will need to make with their lifestyle to ensure that they remain healthy. And so we focus on when we talk about the focus on the type of focus of the types of intervention. We want to look at health promotion intervention for individuals. We want to look a little bit at the policy of organization, environmental actions or social change, as well as public advocacy. And so when we talk about health promotion intervention for individuals, the appropriate strategies that can be utilized, and I use the word can because sometimes, although it is recommended, things might be happening that might make it not the most appropriate at the time. So we say it can be applied. Information giving, keeping in mind that knowledge does not necessarily translate into practice. We want to see some modeling, leading the charge by example. And one of the good example I can look at now that would have happened in recent times is the Minister of Health himself modeling what he was promoting in the Jamaica Moves program. Education, of course, we want to increase awareness. Training in order to promote change in their knowledge level. We also hope to reach the attitude because if the attitude is not impacted, then we are not going to see the behavior following alongside that. We also want sometimes we may need to change some beliefs system that are there. So many years ago when HIV was swinging left, right, and center, and that was in the 80s, you find that there was a belief, a cultural belief at the time that if you have sex with a virgin, it would have cured you from the infection. It took quite a lot of work to get the men to understand that the only thing that is happening is that they are infecting these poor unsuspecting virgins, but they themselves would not be cured. And so there's going to be one addition to the pool of persons who were infected with the disease. Behaviors in regard to health risks such as smoking, eating, and physical activities are some of the things that can actually be done at the individual level. From a policy and practices of organization perspective, we really want to promote organizational change and consultancy. In order to change organizational policies, we're talking about having rules and roles and sanctions and incentives. These are some of the organizational policies that tend to be in place to regulate what happens within the company. And these practices, in order to produce, these practices are implemented in order to change the individual's risky behavior and for them to have greater access to social, educational, and health resources that will promote good health. From the environmental action and social change perspective, social action and social planning at existing sites and on creating new sites in order to produce change in organizations and redistribute resources that can affect people's health. So, for example, the development of a new organization, the strengthening of existing ones through networking or partnership. So, those organizations that are already in place, we try to strengthen them so that they can carry through with necessary policy change and by extension implementation to put things in place to benefit the health and well-being of the employees that are there. Sometimes the new organization may come into being out of some of the issues that are seen. We also want them to be able to do what needs to be done, not only for them to achieve their mandate, but for the health and wellness of the persons that they are providing the service for. Public advocacy will be necessary in order to change legislative, budgetary, and institutional settings that impact at the community, organizational, as well as the individual level. So sometimes things may have to happen from the top. And we do know that when it comes to legislation, that has to go through Parliament because there is an arm of Parliament that deals with that. Budgetary, I mean, that can happen from different levels. It can happen from the organizational level, from the individual level, but also at the policy and governmental level. Here in Jamaica, whatever funding is available for the operations of the different health facilities within the Ministry of Health is divided across 4 health regions, and they are given the budgetary allocation to carry through with the necessary activities at that level to ensure that they have a healthy population in the communities or across the parishes that they have been given responsibilities for. So a little bit of recap that the health belief model, people are more likely to comply with a recommended health behavior if they perceive themselves as being vulnerable to a condition that they consider to be severe. I think the benefits being derived from the recommended action is going to outweigh the cost of engaging in the behavior, and barriers to carry out the action if they see it as being minimal and manageable. And sometimes we need to provide them with a little prompt by giving some cues for action and help them to develop a sense of self-efficacy. The trans-theoretical model of change, this is it in a nutshell, easy to study from little diagram. Look at the stage one, which is the pre-contemplation stage, where persons may be in denial or they are ignorant of the problem. What are the strategies we can use here to assist them? To encourage individuals to rethink their behavior, encourage self-analysis and introspection, and explain the risks of the current behavior. If we can reach them, then we expect that they will progress to the next stage, which is the contemplation stage. And here, sometimes they may experience a sense of ambivalence to do or not to do. What is the decision am I to take here? And so they are experiencing some amount of conflict and emotions. What do we do with them? We weigh the pros and cons with them. So we have that dialogue. What is it, the cons of changing? And there is a little four-way metric that would have looked at that would come very handy as you take them through this process. Confirm their readiness to change and encourage confidence in their ability to carry through with the action that they are looking at. And we also wanted them to identify barriers and how these barriers can be overcome successfully. At that level, then we move on to preparation, and this is where they are making plans to change. And so they will gather more information and they will try to put into place the resources that are required to carry through a desired action. Of course, the strategy here is to help them document their goals, help them to prepare an action plan, and of course, make a list of some motivating statement like, yes, I can achieve this in 5 days. I can achieve that in 2 months. Once that has been successfully navigated, then we move on to the action stage where they are now actually participating in the planned activity. We want to reward success at this point in time, and we also want to provide some amount of social support because right here, relapse is real as it is in the maintenance stage as well. At that maintenance stage is when they are now really settled down and it has become a routine part of their daily activities. So they are maintaining the behavior, and though in temptation would might have present themselves along this journey, they do not allow it to affect them, and it does not become a trigger for them to relapse. Strategies that we can use, we develop coping strategies to deal with the temptation, and remember that they need to reward themselves when they would have achieved a milestone along this journey. And we recommend that they do not use anything familiar with the change that they are trying to, with the behavior that they are trying to walk away from. But sometimes relapse take place, and they may feel disappointed and feel like they're a failure, and frustration do set in. What we want to help them at time to do is to identify what the triggers are that lead to the relapse that they would be experiencing, recognize the barriers to success and the steps that can be utilized to overcome these barriers, and to reaffirm them about their goals and the commitment to change that they would have outlined previously. And this little one here, I am going to ask you when you get your PowerPoint presentation to do this one, fill out the blank spaces, and our next class, we are going to have a little discussion on that one. Okay? Applying the theory to practice at the interpersonal level. You have social change, social cognitive theory, you have social network and social support theory, and there are a lot of theories out there that you can actually investigate and read upon. The focus at the social cognitive theory level, from the interpersonal perspective, is that personal, environmental, and human behavior, which each exert influence on the other. It is recognizing that we're not existing in silo. There are many things that are going to come together to create its impact on us. Constructs and key concepts that can be utilized. We want to look at reciprocal determinism, environment, situations, behavioral capabilities, outcome expectations, outcome expectancies, self-control, observational learning, and of course, self-efficacy and emotional coping. A social network as a theory, the focus for this particular theory is that it is saying that social influences on health and behavior are what are the things that they're really looking out for. And so the key concepts or construct of this particular theory is that environmental support, instrumental support, appraisal, sharing points of view, information, and support for the population in general is where they really place their emphasis. Community theory and the fusion of innovations theory, how these look at how new ideas and products and practices can spread within a society or from one society to another. And for those persons who are doing things like marketing, the diffusions of innovation theory is a really very good one to look at, because it really helps you to understand at the different stages that people are at and how and that they can actually be triggered. So, constructs compatibility, complexity, trialability, observability, impact of social relations, and talk also about the reversibility, communica. Okay, I will leave that one. Risk and uncertainty level, commitment and modifiability. So these two particular theories come with a whole lot of abilities. And so we have to understand these abilities and see how applicable they are to the intervention that we may be planning. The community mobilization theory, we talk about community being driven, or the setting as a community driven or a setting driven focus, and the approaches to assess and solve health and social problems. And the constructs we bring to the table are like planning for mobilization, awareness raising, and coalition building, as well as actionizing what needs to be done. When we look at using the theory to plan a multi-level intervention. When we look at change theory, if we can change people's behavior, then we stand an excellent chance of changing the environment around us. If we can get people to understand the value and importance to health of proper solid waste management, they would not be dumping the garbage any and everywhere and creating not just a home, but a maternity ward for things like rodents and other vectors like roaches and mosquitoes and all of those things. This intervention have to happen at the individual or the intrapersonal level. So, for example, we can look at strategies such as educational sessions, interactive kiosks, the print media, for example, like brochures, and also the whole business of social marketing as campaign as a strategy that can be used. What are the theories that are best utilized at this level? Health belief model, theory of planned behavior, theory of recent action, and a trans-theoretical model of change. When we look at mentoring programs, health committees, goal setting, enhance social networks, or improve social support, we also want to create organizational policy and procedures. The level of intervention here is the interpersonal level, and the theories that are best applicable are like social cognitive theory, social network, and social support theory. When we look at utilizing the media as a strategy for advocacy campaigns and for triggering change to public policy, the level of intervention is really a population intervention. So although the Minister of Health may not go around to every single community, he would have called a meeting and selected persons from the various communities would sit there. That is also a part of what happened. And the best theories that we can use are the communication theory, the fusion of innovation, as well as the community mobilization theory. We also have to think about the levels of influence continuing intrapersonal level. We have individual characteristics that influence people's behavior. So you have things like their knowledge, their attitude, their beliefs, as well as their personality traits. At the interpersonal level, we talk about the process and the primary groups, including the family, the friends, and the peers that provide social identity, support, as well as role definition. At the population level, we have three breakout areas: the institutional factors, the social capital factors, as well as the public policy factors. At the institutional um, population level, we talk about things like the rules, the regulations, the policies, and informal structures that may constrain or promote recommended behaviors. Social capital, we are talking about the networks and the norms or standards that may be formal or informal among individual groups or organization. And as I read that, I remember reading somewhere where I think I'm trying to remember if it was X that they were going to be paying attention to the length of people's clothes. I'm trying to remember that, but all of it is not so clear. So let me leave that one and move on. At the public policy factors level, you talk about the local, national, and international policies and laws that regulate or support healthy actions and practices for prevention, early detection, control, and management of diseases. So we talk about all of this at the population level. What is it that we can do to affect that level generally rather than the individual target population that sometimes we may have to work with? One of the things that we have to keep in mind is the fact that we need evidence-based intervention. The delivery of optimal care through integration of current best scientific evidence, clinical expertise, and experience. So considerations must be given to preferences of individuals, their families, the organizations, as well as the communities within which they find themselves. We have to give practitioners access to interventions that are critically assessed and ones that incorporate scientific evidence into clinical practice. So we talk about the evidence that are there. It's really make a huge difference in terms of what we do. So even though we are going to be planning with the people, we can't throw away the evidence that would have alert us in the first place that all is not well. It must be brought on the table as part of the discussion and the planning process. This evidence-based health promotion intervention also wants to identify the target populations who will benefit from the intervention and to look at the conditions under which the interventions will work and indicate the changes that contribute to the impact of the intervention. So when we look at context for the intervention, what are the settings within which we can carry out these various interventions? I would have looked at these already. We're looking at a settings approach to health promotion. What are the settings for the intervention? You have homes, you have schools, you have faith-based organization, healthcare facilities. It can be residential areas. It can be through sport. It can be through the community-based organizations. Who will be our target specific coverage? We need to ask ourselves, is the intervention with one population workable with another? So can we use what we use with pre-adolescents to work with young adults? The answer may be yes, it may quite likely going to be no, because each different grouping have their little intricacies. So while there are some things that are transportable, sometimes everything is not transportable to a particular population. Which population will benefit most and under what condition? What contributed to its success? And we need to look at demographics of the target population and the setting within which they are. How does role and culture and ethnicity feature? People you have to think about people's norms, their beliefs, and their values. These are rooted in people's culture and in some instances through ethnicity. Interventions need to be compatible and need to be considered their ability to understand, and we must respect and work with the differences that we are going to find. So even within one small community, there can be a range of opinion, a range of differences, but we have to incorporate them into the planning because at the end of the day, we do not want to leave anyone behind. Creativity, expertise, and clinical expertise of our healthcare workers. Protocols and manuals still allow for flexibility and the use of healthcare workers' creativity as well as expertise in achieve desired outcomes. So, for example, role play and other demonstration to facilitate what? Skills building. Remember, skills building is an very important part because if they have the skills, then they can carry through with the activities that are needed to be implemented at their level. And in so doing, then they will impact the wider, broader population or the society. So, in analyzing an intervention program, an example that we can utilize. The content and focus is intervention. So we want to look at generic life skills and specific skills for avoiding alcohol and tobacco use. So we can go to modeling and the behavioral activity. The instructor will demonstrate the skill, will use scripts that participants perform the skill, and the student as peer leaders for subsequent sessions. So what is really going to be happening is that the behavior is going to be demonstrated. Sometimes the participants will be asked to come and demonstrate to show that they understood what they actually saw. And then if we are thinking about schoolers, then they can become testimonials to their peers, and they too can share some of the skills that they would have acquired while they were a part of the developmental process. Another example we can use is homework assignment. We can ask them to do journaling of the times that the skills were actually practiced. So we look at how we can actually look at what is going on and see whether or not it is achieving the objectives we set out to achieve. Cueing is when the instructor helps students to use new behavior to stimulate awareness with their peers. And of course, self-monitoring, very important. Participants logging their behavior to showcase their ability to stay on course. Sometimes they start out with very good intention, but along the journey, it didn't work. And sometimes they may have to read and come back to the drawing board. So in designing an appropriate intervention program, look at what needs to be changed, at what level of prevention is required here, what levels of influence is being brought to bear on the program or the process or the issue that we are talking about. What are the best practices? Why do they consider them to be best practices? So we look at a single or multiple strategies may be required depending on what was found when that initial assessment was done. You talk about appropriate fit for a target population. So whatever we are going to be doing, we have got to ensure that we do not leave our some persons behind as we do what we are doing. Who is influenced? What are the best practices? How do we get our target population to make it, in other words, making our intervention culturally appropriate for our target population. So we have to plan that intervention, plan it with them, and look at the different nuances that may exist and how these can be utilized or how they can use to be a platform to do what you're doing. And a question is now, what resources are available? Where can these resources be accessed to be brought into the package as part of the intervention? So in summary, a health promotion intervention should address one or more risk factors that are carefully defined, measurable, modifiable, and common among the target population and constitute a threat to the health status of the target audience, and it also should reflect consideration of the special characteristics as well as needs and preferences of our target population. It should include include interventions that will clearly reduce risk factors and appropriate for the setting, make optimum use of whatever resources are available, and try to be as organized as possible, plan and implement in such a way that it can be evaluated. If we are not able to evaluate our intervention, it means that we don't have a handle on whether or not we are making a difference having done all of that work. And I believe we have come to the end of this particular presentation, which took us just 1 hour. It says, no matter what you may be moving through, no matter how tough it feels, how much it hurts, we have to learn to do our best to breathe the breath of life. May we know with all our hearts that we can breathe ourselves into a calmer and tranquil state of being. And let your faith roar so loud that you can't hear what doubt is saying. Are there any questions? Are there any comments? If not, we move on. Things may be hard, but hard does not mean impossible. So keep on trying. What you should never do is to cut down a tree in the winter time. Never make a decision when you are in that low place. Wait. Be patient. The storm will pass and the spring will return. And these are my few words for this morning. And so if there are no comments, no questions, I want to wish for you a great rest of the day, today being Friday, and you're being tired and flags out, and probably falling asleep like myself. You can have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, teacher.
Hopefully
Appreciate it.
everybody.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Mrs.
Mrs.
Walters.
Walters.
All
Just
right.
a
Mrs.
quick question.
Walters? Oh,
A
go
quick.
ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just checking, Miss. This is April. If you got the email that I sent, we had resent the strategic plan for Group 5. I know you had asked for people to resend it.
Yeah, I
I was
see it.
just checking if you got it.
I've seen them coming in.
Okay, okay,
I'm
okay.
actually
All right.
going to be downloading them after this session so I can print and start marking.
All right, no problem.
Okay. Yes, Akeem.
Oh, I wanted to ask the reflection. I
The next
unless I missed
section.
it, I'm sorry if I missed it, but was there a word count?
No,
Oh, there wasn't. Okay. All right. Thank you.
no problem. So bye everybody.
Good, good
Bye.
morning.
Thank you.
Bye, miss. Have
For
a
the
good day.
same
Bye-bye.
morning, can you hear me?
Yes, Makisha. Yes, go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, go
Oh,
ahead.
hi. For the same reflection, there was a mark scheme or rubric for that as well, or no? We just write however we feel about
You
the
mean for your
project.
reflection? No, there was no mark scheme for the reflection. Because that is your
Okay.
you sharing your experience. So I really couldn't give you a mark scheme for.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Have a good day.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye, Mrs. Walters.
Alrighty.
All right. Thank you. Bye bye.